which is an organization that supports people affected by sexual violence and domestic abuse in Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly, Devon, and Wiltshire. And I know this is a topic close to everybody's heart, so I thought to start off with, we'd start at the end, if you like, Sophie, and just it'd be interesting to find out a little bit more about First Light, what they do, what you've seen there, and also your role as a trustee, because I know everybody's interested in, or a lot of people interested in NED and trustee roles. So over to you, Sophie. I know also, sorry, over to you, and then I'm taking it straight back. Sorry. I know, a nice small group on the call today. Let's make this interactive. Put your hands up. Put in the chat. Let's have a nice conversation. So, Sophie, over to you for a minute.
Thank you. Yes, and please do interrupt. I don't have slides or points written down, so it is very fluid. And I'll start not with the end, but with this NED rule. But I hope it's not the end of my DNI journey. Just to clarify. I have been interested in governance for a while, and I've done the FT non-executive director diploma whilst we were in lockdown. It was well timed, and I had been looking for my first board role for a while after that. And yes, last year I applied to First Light through a new role, and was successful in joining their board. This is still quite a new thing for me, but First Light have been around for a while. The name was created in 2017, but it was by merging a few local charities that they were created. And yes, they mainly operate in the Southwest, although recently they got their first national contract for the church. I'll say a bit more about that. So they are quite a big organization in the sense that they, interestingly, they've got between 80 and 100 people working for them full time, which is equivalent to where I work in GIB. So that's, therefore I feel they're big in that sense, and their funding comes mostly from contracts that they have either with the NHS, with the council, with different public organization and structures, and as I just said as well, more recently with the church. And their role is really to provide support to victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. But you said it, Mark, very well. You said to people affected by, and one thing that I found quite amazing with First Light is that they're already very much advanced in their DNI journey, because even though we all know that it's mostly women who are victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence, it's not just women, and they've already, transform themselves, if you want, to make sure that they really supported all victims, no matter their gender, their age, their religion, their background, etc. And that's not easy. And they had to be thoughtful about recruiting people from different communities to better represent the people they're trying to serve. And what they do is they have help desk, they have counselors, they have advisors, and they just provide support in many ways, listening, advising on what are the steps available for victims to either make themselves safe, or to commence proceeding with the justice system, and just recover. But all of that is very much structured in line with the commission that they get. So they get very specific commission, and therefore, for example, they've got a commission to have 7 independent advisors based there, and to target this kind of victims falling within this criteria, and that's what they will do. And they do have quite a big board of trustees, because we're clearly not remunerated, and therefore, they thought that having more people was helpful, because they can draw on people's time and expertise. They have more people's time and expertise to draw on when they need support. They have actually board meeting every 2 months, which is quite frequent compared to what I'm experiencing my day job. And they also have more in-depth session that they call strategy or their ways, where they look at what they're doing, the impact they're having, how they can they can overcome the challenges. One of their challenge has been that they always wanted to support victims or survivors, but also to prevent violence, right, and domestic abuse. And because, on the contrary, what they've seen is the numbers have increased, as we all know. It's been a very negative trend, especially since the pandemic, which seems to have exacerbated, many of the causes of domestic violence. So they
Did
all
you
want.
see, Sophie? Did you see a really big spike during lockdown and COVID?
I mean, I wasn't a trustee then, but yeah, they report that they have always more people to serve. One of their big challenge is to manage queuing system.
Okay.
And it breaks their heart, and it breaks our heart as trustees to hear that people don't get help immediately, even when they're in such dire situation where they really needed help. They really need help, but the fact is they have limited resources, and all they try to do is to keep the waiting time as reasonable as possible, even though it's not reasonable to ask people who have been through this situation to wait any time at all. But that's just what they're facing.
A few months ago, and talking about preventative stuff as well, we did some work. There was some good campaigns up in Scotland, focusing on men, and thinking about where this all starts. And it starts with a wolf whistle, or some banter in the changing room. What sort of things are First Light doing to stop the occurrence?
Well, the two things they could be doing, but as I said, it's not always been easy for them to really deploy this, because their funding is directed. They found it more difficult to find funding for prevention rather than treatment. But the two areas is, one, lobbying and sharing expertise with local authorities or the government around what actions could we as a society take to prevent violence. And the second is workshop and training and awareness sessions. They start very early. They start in primary school, and I have to say, as a mom of two daughters, one who's just transitioned from primary to secondary school, we had recently a lot of, there was this quite difficult experience with the whole Andrew Tate thing. And therefore, knowing that they start early, I felt that was really a really interesting approach, because we don't realize how early this conditioning starts with boys. And therefore, how difficult it is to then break those barriers later on in life, when all their life they've been conditioned to think about women that way, and about themselves in that way as well.
Yeah. I think we all need to just quickly take a time out and say hello to Lindsay's daughter. Hello, Lindsay's daughter. How are you? Welcome. Are you not at school today?
Are you at school today?
No.
No. Okay. Well, you have a nice day. Yeah? You have a nice day. So, Sophie, sorry. Thank you, Lindsay, and lovely to meet you. Sophie, moving on. Your own journey looking through your profile, you've, I guessing after university, it was Soc Gen and BNP, presumably, in France and then Italy, and then City in London for a few years. Must have been very different cultures, a different time as well. We're talking about the mid-90s. What were your first experiences in the workplace in those three sort of relatively different cultures?
The reality is that now that I've done all this self-awareness work, that I've done all this work to really inform myself about unconscious bias, about the systematic barriers that underrepresented group face, I realize, I notice what's wrong around me, but I didn't used to. So the reality, the answer to your question, Mark, was fine. I never had any bad experiences, because anyway, I wouldn't have recognized one if I had one.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to point my finger to, what was actually happening. So, for example, when I noticed things were a little bit different, but I couldn't really put words or judgment to it. For example, when I started at City in London, it was my first role in the UK. I was very surprised by how international, cosmopolitan Citibank was, coming from France. There wasn't actually one English person on my team. There was some English speakers, but no one from England, and they were from all over the world, even from countries I had never heard before, like Iceland. I had heard about Iceland before. I didn't realize where they were and who they were. So it was very cosmopolitan. In some firms, in some others, on the contrary, it was very what's the contrary of diverse?
Undiverse.
It was very non-diverse, like Schroeder's was, very, very British, very white, very men-dominated, and also very wealthy. And so was the private bank as well at City. One thing that I remember noticing is that all of my female colleagues would have a big rock on their hand, and I thought, wow, these huge diamonds, that's impressive. What I didn't realize is that, of course, there was a lack of diversity in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds as well in the private bank at City.
Yeah.
So in short, I think I sailed through these years without really thinking about situations in a gender or diversity term. Even though at home I was really clearly for gender equality. My husband is a stay-at-home dad. He's from Chile. He therefore had a completely different experience, a life experience than I have. He did face racism in his day-to-day life, whereas I clearly haven't, and therefore at home I could think about this privilege, these barriers, these issues, but I wasn't really translating them in my workplace that much.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Sophie, whether Sue and Lindsay and Judith and Carolyn. So I'm picking on you and Catherine because you have your cameras on. Did you experience that? When did you become aware of D&I as an issue or a challenge? Judith?
Go on, that's fine. You go first.
I think for me, pretty much very early on in my career, and I joined financial services in the 90s, and we were moving away from a culture whereby women were expected to wear skirts. I mean, they had literally just, in fact, I think maybe they changed the rules in the first 6 months that I worked at the bank, whereas prior to that, women had to wear skirts. which is just an extraordinary thing, right? And the job that I had was I was on the trading floor supporting the traders, and so I was sort of running around all the time, and sometimes, you know, climbing up on desks and things, you know, and you know, your choice of dress was always a key thing. I think at JP Morgan, the trading floor was a nicer environment than I'd experienced at another bank. And I'm sorry, Sophie, it was a French bank, so, and it wasn't very pleasant. But there was still a lot of, it was still fairly misogynistic. And so there were sort of, you know, various posters on people's desks and things, which at one point I did point out to the head trader on that particular desk. And I think initially he was very affronted, but did agree to take it down for the reasons that I told him. So I think almost straight away, you know, and probably because working generally in the minority. So, you know, not surrounded by an equal number of females to males. So,
yeah. Thank you. So Judith.
Yeah, I think I really relate to sort of sailing through those early years. I think 80s and 90s, I don't think we were any the wiser, and certainly I don't think I was. I think, you know, a lot of it now is hindsight. When I look back, you know, the warning signs, why put yourself in a private practice law firm where there's only one female partner, you know, things like that. But now looking back, I definitely think, I think for me, you know, current Metro Bank culture, just how we are, our behaviours, the culture that runs through, I think, yeah, I would say definitely in the last 10 years, so much more aware than I have been. But yes, I can relate to the sailing through the years, and a lot of hindsight now, thinking, yeah, can see exactly where we've come from, and why it's so important that we keep going.
Yeah, and we've come a long way, I think, is the
in those 10 years we've come a long way.
Yeah. Brilliant. So Lindsay, Catherine, Caroline, you're more than welcome if you've got something to say, or indeed Derek, thinking back to, you know, actually, you know, I know my experiences as a man in those early years and not thinking about it.
Yeah, but I sort of had a similar experience, you know, some similar thoughts. I think if I look back over my career and some of the behaviours I'd observed and probably been part of, I'm sort of, you know, shocked. It's just amazing how I don't know how ignorant I think. You know, I think a lot of men and organisations were. And it's just a, you know, I don't know, it's a funny analogy, but you know, you sort of think of World War II having sort of relatively recent. You know, World War II was in the 40s, and you think, how could that all have happened? But you know, for instance, as Sue was saying, you know, that this from a gender perspective, this was happening in the 90s. You know, it's just to me, it's just unfathomable. You know, that we didn't sort of collectively do something about this before. And I think I'm sort of going to just sort of hijack a bit, because Sophie, I was going to ask, so I'm really involved in inclusion networks at Mizuho, all sorts of networks, so gender, women, men, pride, cultural diversity, etc. And we have a big presence in Paris, and it is virtually impossible to get traction in our Paris office. It just we're just seeing a complete lack of interest. Is that your perception? Did you find that Paris and I don't know, more generally France is behind the curve?
You know, I don't know is the truth, because I've only worked 18 months in France in my whole life, and it was at the beginning of my career. It was my first job, so I've lived here for more than 20 years now. Certainly all my you know roles in the financial services have been here in London, and therefore it's really hard for me to say.
Yeah, because funny enough, we've been trying to sort of establish chapters of all of the networks that we have in London, in our European offices, and they've been sort of really welcomed. But in Paris, even from senior female colleagues, the sort of response has been no, not interested. We're and sort of paraphrasing, we devote our time to Mizuho or to the organization during the day to do our work, and outside of our work, we're not interested. In anything, certainly not at lunch times, or even, particularly not after hours. And I was just wondering whether it's peculiar to our organization, or not. And does anybody else on the call have
Derek, I've got some experience there, and perhaps we can touch base offline.
Thanks. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you short there. Sophie, because I do want to get the rest of your journey through, Sophie. So I think you were at Schroders.
Yes, and that's where I started to. There was a moment of realization, which was when I was promoted as the global head of the investment risk framework, and this was announced, via an email internally, and lots of women that had just, worked with a little bit, or some that I've not worked at all with, congratulated me, and there I realized that I was actually becoming a role model, and that actually, they were happy that a woman got a global role, and because suddenly I realized there weren't that many. So I started to be a lot more aware from there on about the issues, but also about maybe, about my thoughts, about my frustration, about that I wanted to help, that I wanted to make things better. But it wasn't until I attended the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society, which, Derek, actually happens in France every year in Paris. But is it well attended by French people? I'm not sure. It was very international, the audience there. That I realized that actually, it was a work thing. It was a business issue. It wasn't just a personal issue, and therefore, where I really started to work on it, during my day job. And Derek, I do obviously, devote my lunch times or my evenings to it, but more importantly, I think what really I am grateful for, and I am happy with, is that it is also part of my day job, and I think it should be part of any manager's day job to work on resolving those systematic barriers at work. It's not just an add-on. It's important. It's part of leadership. It's part of our cultural work. So yes, and since then, I've really, I think, I've realized how information is important, how information is a weapon, how statistics, how research studies, with snippy example can really open people's eyes to what the problems are, because to the point we are making before, I think ignorance is our biggest enemy. It's not the lack of goodwill. It's just people don't realize, men and women, and white and black, maybe, I don't know, but generally people don't realize what problems still are. And I often hear from people, oh, but it's all fine now with all the work we've done, there are plenty of women on the board, we're all fine. It's like, no, there are not plenty of women on the board. And anyway, that's just, one thing. What about CEOs? What about, all these other things? But it's just people don't realize, what we're still facing as an issue. And certainly, wouldn't make the link, Mark, between women being unrepresented or unvalorized, not as valued as men, or black people not being as valued as other, not their authority not being recognized as much with then violence. They don't see the link, whereas the link is been clearly proven. So I certainly, my tip is inform yourself, read a lot. It's really so interesting, and it is so powerful. But what I do find difficult is to convince people to make this same investment. Time and time again, you know, I feel that people are just not interested, and therefore, you know, they don't spend the time really listening, reading to things that would change their perspective.
Sophie, when you say people there, are you talking about men and women, and is there a difference between the two?
Men and women, and very clever women, and women I value and I respect and I love, and they don't get it.
Could you give some examples of what you've done in your company to raise the awareness, please?
Oh yes, that I'm would really be happy with. So at GIB, what we've done is we really adopted a very systematic approach. So you know, we looked at it as a strategy, not just a networking or a forum. So first of all, is we thought through about who was going to lead it. And then second, we thought through about why we were going to do something. So we decided that it was not just about you know, the culture within the organization and having engaged colleagues and having the right culture, but it was also a business imperative, because we know that diverse and inclusive culture means that there are better decision making, therefore more effective business activities, better risk management, less groupthink, you know, and it's been proven again and again that diverse and inclusive firms perform better than others. And as we are a sustainable asset manager, we also decided that we wanted to drive a positive impact on the world, you know, that our sustainable investment activities is not just about the environment, it's society as well. And we wanted to align to the UN goals around gender as well. So we look at it around 6 measures. We engage, we equip, we empower, we embed, we evaluate, and we evolve. So engaging is, you know, creating a network, you know, setting up events, and therefore having people talk. I think what's really made a difference is not always to invite someone who is an external expert, because then, you know, people want to hear, they come. Those people who are not interested, they don't. I think what's worked quite well for us is asking any members of staff to just share their experience. So, you know, I had a colleague who talked about socioeconomic diversity, because she's from a working background. She's worked at Goldman, she's worked with us, and, you know, there were lots of barriers along her way, and she wanted to talk about this, and she did. There was another colleague who talked about, you know, racism and the problem with Black people in particular. You know, how if you're actually not against racist, then you're for racism. And you know, we had lots of really personal examples like that. And because people like their colleague and they want to hear about their colleague's experience, they were more likely to join these conversations. So that's one area around engage. Then equip is, you know, clearly training, framework, processes, guidance, so that you know, it's a systematic approach, so that it's not just a few voices doing all of the work for everyone. It has to be cascaded down so that everybody participates. That goes as well with Empower. And part of it is also recognizing the good work and sharing responsibility. So on the embed side, what we've done is we've set goals at the firm level in our balance scorecard, but I also worked with HR to set goals for each individual in their annual, you know, appraisal process, where, you know, you say, this year I need to achieve 5 things. One of them was D&I. And there were examples of how you can support D&I, but we really wanted people to customize, you know, what they were going to do. And then there was recognition in the sense that I fed into those appraisals at the end of the year with the 360 feedback. there were people who really gave their time and went above and beyond their job were invited to a special event with our CEO. In addition, of course, of this, objective being rated as part of the performance appraisal.
Sophie, that is so important, and I'm sure some other people, and Lindsay's got your hand up, and maybe you're going to say the same thing here, is so much of D&I work, despite the fact that it is a business imperative, is done off the side of people's desks, and they don't get recognized, rewarded, or it's not part of a day job. I think it's marvelous that you've recognize that it is part of your day job, if you like, and critical to the appraisal and reward process.
I mean, I would want to go further, and I've heard of bigger firms where they actually carved out a proportion of their bonus pool to give special bonus for those people who had done this work. That, I think, is the gold standard.
Absolutely, Lindsay.
If you could let me know which firms they are, that would be great, Sophie. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of side of desk going on. Just a minute, you can show them in a second. Sorry, she's done a picture of you all on the Zoom.
Oh, that's nice. Very nice.
You want to show them your picture? She's done. Oh, hold on a minute. I've got to take my. I'll take my blur off. So my question was going to be around. You mentioned some of the kind of you putting D&I into people's kind of focus areas, objectives. Could you give some examples of how that's worked in practice for different individuals, for different teams?
Has it worked perfectly? First of all, no. Have everybody really customized those objectives into something, concrete and objective that can be evaluated at year end? No. But every year you refine. Yes. So this year we're actually going to get statistics, and we're going to actually review and look at the whole picture. So I don't have the whole picture, but that would be things like, for example, leading an event. It could be participating into our reverse mentoring initiative. It could be writing a nomination award request. It could be all sorts of different things that everybody can really help with.
Okay, that's useful. Yeah, we have everybody has something related to culture or D&I as part of their objectives, but obviously, and similarly, it's kind of up to them people what they fill that with. I co-chair our D&I network, so obviously I can kind of fill it, but I just kind of wonder, those that are less engaged, what are they, if it's up to them to put it in, what are they likely to put in, and all that. So I'm just kind of interested in what kind of targets people are given, are team leaders given, you need to try and improve your diversity scores and change your hiring, or I'm just interested in that, how you kind of put things into practice, really.
Yeah, I don't think we've done a better job. And yes, I agree with you that what I really wanted to see is actually, for all manager, a D&I score on again, objective targets to start with. It was a little bit more flexible, a little bit self-driven. And yes, it means that a lot of people just committed to participate. And attend events, but that's the first step. We were just saying how difficult it is sometimes to get people to participate. So that's the first step.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, look at that.
Could we get a picture on the WhatsApp later?
I'll share it around, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And the question of evaluating is very important. Can you still hear me? Yeah. So the question of evaluating is very important, because I think that without hard measures, quantitative measures, it's very easy to be forced into lulled into a false sense of achievement. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Yep.
And therefore, what I really push for is also saying, okay, So what targets do we want to have for representation, for promotion, for all of these things? And the reality is that when you start, it's really, really hard because you don't have enough data sometimes to set the target. And also, you don't want to be too directive in the sense that sometimes, especially if you cascade it down to smaller team, you can't really put targets around representation without raising the risk of discrimination. So we ended up putting targets around, for example, a 50-50% number of candidates in the recruitment process. Yes, so it's not amazing, but it's a target that we can therefore refer to and see whether we're meeting it or not. And for disability, for example, our target is around disclosure rate. We couldn't do better because nobody wanted to say they're disabled, and I understand why, because if I'm asked if you're disabled, it's not a great way to be asked the question. I would have asked it differently. I think the reality is that we need to explain. It's more about challenges, more about the challenges that they face because things are not done in a way that is inclusive. But yeah, these are little targets that I think really help because you can go back to measure progress and therefore justify more efforts.
Thank you. Sophie, just on, and it'd be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on this. Getting and hearing a lot of kickback on targets. That sometimes the exec committee agree a target or sign a charter for very, very good reasons. But then when that's cascaded and that message is cascaded down through the organization, some people in the organization start feeling threatened by that, or just doing stuff because it's seen as ticking a box and targets. Have you faced that? Has anybody else faced that and thought about those problems? And particularly we're seeing with our work with Men for Inclusion is driving quite often majority straight white men to become more resistant and come up with the, she only got the job because, and this D&I stuff has gone too far. Has anyone else come up and felt those kind of problems within their organization? Judith? Sorry, Catherine.
Sorry.
Go on, Catherine.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
I in my previous job, I was doing a change of culture type project with other culture people, and I was implementing things around D&I, trying to get engagement in meetings from different types of people, trying to, when we were interviewing, getting different people in the room to do the interviews, to get different perspectives and all of that kind of thing. So I did quite a lot of work around that. And when I was sort of relaying that to my management, saying, oh yeah, I've done this and that, I was like, well, why are you telling me that? No one cares about that stuff. No one needs to hear about that, which was extremely shocking. And it showed me that he was actually not in the least bit interested or engaged with any of that, and he was ticking boxes, so to speak. The way I circumvented that was I fed it back to the sort of leadership within the culture journey we were doing, what the attitude was, and she went to the senior manager above him. She didn't sort of name and shame or anything like that, but she ensured that I got praise for the work that I was doing, so that he could see that the company expected my behavior and not his behavior.
Yeah.
So it was done very subtly, and it didn't name or shame, because when people behave like that, they've usually got their own problems, haven't they? So, you know, to name and shame exacerbates and makes things worse generally. So I thought that was a really good way of showing him what the behavior that's expected.
Yep. Brilliant. Thank you. And Caroline, so you were going to...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't hear it obviously officially, but you do hear some men talking about, yeah, you wouldn't get the job anyway if you're not female, black, and disabled. So super comments like that, right? And that is the kind of comment where you then, it's like you're normally so flabbergasted that I don't know what to say to that. But what I thought, and I didn't connect those two first, but our company has introduced paternity leave, 6-month paternity leave, and that's somehow now men now come to me and say, oh, me taking paternity leave for 6 months, is that going to damage my career? And you think, hello? You're talking to a mom that went off for like 12 months, and and then it actually makes them think, it's like, oh, I would like that, but you know, I'm making payoffs here. But
And Caroline, I think quite often that part of the solution to paternity leave is for men of my generation to say how much they regret that they weren't able to have it, and how much they feel they lost because they didn't take it. I'm seeing paternity leave as well become much more common. Maybe not people taking the whole amount of leave, but taking so small in comparison, but taking 4 or 5 or 6 weeks sometime in that first year as becoming more normal. And that's, I think we have to say that's a start, and it needs to grow. Brilliant.
I was just going to pick up actually on that point, and with the sort of pat leave. I think returning from maternity leave, there has always seemed to be a need for the mother to sort of prove themselves again, competency, capability, before they start sort of moving through their career. And I just wonder with pat leave whether men will feel the same. And I just heard of someone in our organisation who actually, a dad just coming back after taking his full year off. And, it would be really interesting to see, he's loved it. But, actually, as he comes back in, how that feels for him, and, will he need to prove himself again, or just be accepted that he's exactly the same person with exactly the same competencies as when he left.
I wonder whether as well, lots of the Men for Inclusion work, and Lindsay, I'll come to you definitely. The Men for Inclusion work we do is sees that the people actually then start making assumptions about people's commitments to their careers. So there's a need to go and do a project in the other side of the world, which is going to take you away. She won't do it because she's got young kids. I wonder whether he will face that as well, because clearly he's got caring responsibilities and is sharing those caring. Whether people will make those assumptions about him, I think probably not. Maybe Lindsay.
It was interesting, Judith, your comment that you said, women, when they come back from maternity leave, often feel like they have to prove themselves again. I was wondering whether that's kind of an internal or external belief, and to what extent that is, genuinely the situation that women are kind of, basically told you've got to prove themselves again, or how much is that they feel like they have to do that, and it's implied or inferred, but how much of that is an internal kind of imposter syndrome feeling versus actually what the environment around them thinks, and therefore maybe men coming back from paternity leave are just like, well, of course everyone will expect that I'm as good as I was.
I'm the same person. No, I totally agree.
Obviously being generalized in both senses, but I think, Funnily enough, because I didn't feel it coming back after my second. I definitely had struggles after my first, because first time is newer, and second time I came back and I hadn't had mat cover of any kind. My colleague was desperately covering me, and when I came back, she was like, "Thank goodness you're back. Here is everything." So it was quite nice to come back and be needed. So I didn't really have any major concerns on coming back the second time. But yeah, I do wonder how much is that kind of personal attitude. But anyway,
I agree.
But certainly, I think that shared parental leave is going to be the one thing that's going to, move the dial materially within the next few years. In terms of raising awareness, for these men who go away, for the people around them, and to go back to the beginning of our conversation, I've actually asked someone in my team who had a 3 months paternity leave to come and talk to the rest of the organization about his experience, and we'd have a dialogue about, are there challenges? How does it feel? Does it change? Does it, is it very different to other people's experience, etc.
Interesting, brilliant. Sophie.
Yeah, I think this is what we've been doing at GIB. It's very much journey. I think it's been probably about 2 years now that it's been written down as a strategy, and we have these goals. So it's still early in 2 years. What you can achieve is clearly limited, but if it's good that actually the things are in place, that even if I stepped away now, I don't feel it would die. I would feel that it's a system, it's a structure, and therefore it's something perenne, which I think is really important. Nonetheless, all of this is really fragile. And to Catherine's point, because if there are not enough champions who carry this message of recognition and holding people accountable, then if there was a change of leadership, it could easily go back down.
Sophie, thank you. We're coming to towards the end of our hour, and got about 8 minutes left. Are there any comments people want to make? Any questions? What's thoughts on today?
Can I ask, Sophie?
Yep.
I think just about sort of wider culture, not just D&I, but how across your organisation you measure culture, and you're sort of feeding that measure. How well are you doing? I know you've said it's a journey, and yeah, I would share that for my organisation as well. But how are you actually demonstrating to the board that you're the measurement of culture, of how that dial is turning?
Yeah, 3 things really. The first one is that we have regular MI in our dashboards that we said, I mean, they were there before in the main, but we said, okay, these ones are actually an indication of culture. Yeah. Any delays with mandatory training, any people not following policies or procedures. Also, we monitor our Glassdoor reviews, what ratings we get there, absenteeism, so a whole range of things. Yeah, and these are the regular thing that keep ticking. The second is a much more in-depth annual cultural survey, and that was very interesting. Building that and looking at the results, and I hope that going forward, no firms will continue to do engagement survey without looking at the wider cultural piece. Because for me, you should really embed it, and that should be the people survey you do every year. But certainly a wider people survey is very important. And what we've decided to do is to really much follow the blueprint of the banking standard boards, ex-banking standard boards, which I think now is called the cultural board. But it's I'll Google it and then I'll put it in the chat. But basically, they publish the questions and they publish a blended results for all of their members, so you can benchmark yourself against it. So, it's great because not only because you don't have to wait 1 year to see whether you're progressing or not, you can also benchmark yourself against the rest of the financial services industry. And clearly, standards are low, but at least it's
but you've got a baseline.
You've got a baseline. It's a peer-for-peer comparison. And the third aspect is a specialist audit. So, paying for a consultant to actually conduct an audit, and it's not just one audit. For us, it's a series of 3 audits because it's such a wide subject. That and also it's over time, so it gives us the impetus if you want to make progress in between in between reviews. So that's good. So these are the 3 things that we have been looking at.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And actually, I'm internal audit, and actually, just before Christmas, I presented on a culture audit to our exec team, which went down, sort of really well. But I think it's just interesting, and I would say yes, I'm sort of ticking off the things that we're doing, and they're very, very much sort of related. But interested to see if there's anything different that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Now, the audit is great. It was a great experience, and they were not afraid of doing things a bit differently than your traditional auditor process. So they interviewed people, and they summarized best practice before also pulling up the findings. And I thought that was actually a great way for audit to prove their value and to carry the right culture, that I've asked our internal audit to do that in all of their audit report going forward. It's not yet done, as I said, it takes time, but it will happen. I'll continue to ask, also encourage people by drawing out what are the area where things are working well before you highlight the issues that need to be addressed.
That's good.
Just a little plug for us, if I may, on that. A number of you, and thank you for those who did, undertook our lived experience survey at the back end of last year. And the results of that, the full results of that, we're launching on the 15th, we think it's the 15th of March, just after International Women's Day, at Christie's, again, the auction house. But firms also then who are engaging with us with Men for Inclusion, starting to use those figures and benchmark them against their own survey that we do for them. And that brings out a lot of areas where there are, let's say, just areas for concern and areas where people need to focus on. The plug is, look out for the 15th of March at Christie's and come along. If you came last year, it was a fantastic event. And we're really looking forward to sharing those results. But also there are we've got some key speakers who we're just engaging with, who are going to come along and talk. So it should be a really good event. Brilliant. Sophie, do you have any suggested reading material as coming from Carolyn?
Well, in terms of gender, my best book ever was The Authority Gap. And it really, really reveals all these blind spots that we've got. One that is quite funny is, I don't know if you've recently watched or a little bit at least of an old American Hollywood movie, the time of Marilyn Monroe. And you may recall that all women had a very high-pitched voice then, and they sound a bit silly because actually we associate high-pitched voice to the contrary of authority, someone who's light, a little bit silly, but maybe fun. And in society, and the research has shown that in society where there is more gender equality, women have got a lower pitch voice. So which our bodies change with the society. And that I thought was, wow, that's, very striking.
Do men's go up higher pitch as well?
That wasn't part of the study. So you see, the authority gap number 2, Mark.
So, yeah.
Yes, your challenge.
Brilliant. Listen, Sophie, thank you so much. Brilliant session, as always. But thank you for your contribution, your membership, and indeed being a client on the recruitment side. Absolutely brilliant. Anybody ever thinking about GIB? I know when Sophie approached me, the G is Gulf International Bank. I immediately came to some conclusions in my head about what the culture might be like. And Sophie and the management team at GIB blew all of those prejudices, those biases away when I went in and met them. A really amazing place to work. And Catherine, I hope you enjoy your career and your time there.
Thanks. Yeah, and I can definitely vouch that what you hear about the culture and the interviews and things is definitely what you get when you get there. So I was really pleased that with the move into there, because I got offered 2 jobs and I went with where I thought the culture would suit me the best, and absolutely Sophie's and the team have made it proved that it's definitely not tick box, it's ingrained in there.
Catherine and Sophie, thank you.
You.
Just a couple of weeks' time, Katie, what's happening?
We have a lady who calls herself the burnout coach. She's coming along, hopefully, in March. We have not already burnt out already, although I know that we are all at probably near capacity. So she's come along to do a session with us about the burnout cycle and how to prevent that before it happens. And then I need to do some rejigging because we've got International Women's Day and I've booked a coffee break in a terrible time slot. So kind of ignore the website just for give me a little minute to rectify that. But yeah, the rest will be on the website in a couple of weeks' time.
Brilliant. Some final thoughts from me. You may have seen the LinkedIn post I did following the workshops we were running at Standard Chartered, and a number of people have asked about the picture in the background on that LinkedIn post. It looks like a half-finished picture. It is a half-finished picture. Research at Oxford has shown that female artists are likely to get half the price compared with male artists for their art, which to me is absolutely extraordinary, because I love art, and I never really think of it as through a gender lens. Anyway, Standard Chartered, and I'll put a link in the chat, got involved in the gender art gap, and got a number of female artists to paint half pictures, which is what that was. I think if we can't get it right in a place where absolutely gender doesn't matter at all, in the art world, we need to start thinking about how we close the gap and what we do and stand up and be counted. That's all from me. Sophie, again, thank you so very much for standing up and being with us today and sharing your